The September 12th, 2023 school board meeting is called to order. Would you please stand for a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Hawkins, would you please call the roll?
Yes. Chair Seberg,
Here.
Vice Chair Stevens,
Here.
Mrs. Williams,
Here.
Mr. Hollingsworth, Ms. Brooks,
Here.
Ms. Spall,
Here.
Ms. Brescia,
Here.
Ms. Hyland,
Here.
Ms. Bland.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. One moment, please.
Addition and deletion. Addition and deletion.
Dr. Newman, are there any additions or deletions to the agenda this evening?
Yes, ma'am. We need to add under discussion, student achievement, strategic plan update, student academic success, SOL performance, and strategic response.
Thank you. Can I get a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
Chair, I move that the School Board of the City of Manassas approve the public meeting agenda as modified.
I have a motion by Mrs. Spall, seconded by Mrs. Brooks, that the school board of the City of Manassas approve the public meeting agenda as modified. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 6-0. First up on our agenda is superintendent's announcements and spotlights. Mrs. Radford.
Thank you, Chair Seberg. Good evening, other members of the board, and good evening to everyone that has joined us tonight. I am honored to stand before you with a few spotlights and announcements this evening. So we want to begin with a bittersweet thing. You know, I don't always like saying goodbye to our employees, but I am honored tonight to shine the spotlight on a transportation family member who has a proven track record of time and dedication to Manassas City Public Schools. I'm going to ask her to come forward so that I can tell you a little bit about her. Patricia Andrews, are you here, Trish? Come on down. All right. Ms. Andrews is a beloved member of our transportation family, and she has recently embarked on a well-deserved journey into retirement. Ms. Andrews, with her remarkable dedication, is an MCPS legend. What makes her career truly remarkable is the astounding fact that she spent 40 years behind the wheel of a school bus, and in those 4 decades, not a single accident tarnished her impeccable record. Now, that's not just noteworthy, it's extraordinary. Her commitment to safety and the well-being of our students is unparalleled, and her record stands as a testament to her unwavering focus on their welfare. From her early days as a bus driver to taking on the role of a bus driver trainer, she not only transported students safely, but also passed on her wisdom to the next generation of drivers. As she finished her career at MCPS, she served as one of our special transport drivers, ensuring that every child received the specialized care and attention they deserved. Ms. Andrews has been a driving force for our students, and we wish her well in her retirement. Congratulations, Ms. Andrews. And thank you to all of transportation that came to support her tonight. Wow, 40 years, that's awesome. Okay, so at this time, we have another announcement that we'd like to make, and Mr. Gfeller is going to come forward to help me with that.
Good evening, Chair Seaberg, Vice Chair Stevens, members of the board, Dr. Newman. I am here to announce an exciting partnership with George Mason University. Our Dean of Admissions for Mason, who was a big supporter of Manassas City, would have been here, but he got called away for some travel. But I'm pleased to announce a direct admissions program initiative that will be partaking here in Manassas City. So just to tell you a little bit about what direct admissions is, it's an increasing number of colleges and universities are implementing a new admission strategy to boost enrollments and increase diversity. It's called the direct admissions, a process where colleges make offers of admissions to students without requiring them to go through a lengthy application process. And so George Mason University, which has been a fantastic partner of ours, is partnering with 8 local high schools. They're partnering with Osborne High School, and they will be offering direct admission to any of our students that have a 3.25 GPA. They will be receiving conditional admittance letters, and they'll be going through a simplified application. So if any of our students have a 3.25 and they're not applying to one of the specialty programs at George Mason, they will be guaranteed admission into George Mason. And so we are very excited about that. We are in the process right now of finalizing the MOU with George Mason, and as soon as they have our data, they will be reaching out directly to our students, offering them admission and next steps for the fall. So we are very excited about that. So you'll be hearing a little bit more about this. They will be reaching out to students. There'll be an email campaign. There'll be direct admissions offers letters coming out, and also landing pages for our parents to go to. Mr. Flugrath and his team will be talking with parents at back to school night that this is coming, so they're not surprised by it. But this is a really great thing for our students here in Manassas. So again, they would have been here to help me announce it, but they were busy time of year for them as well. So we're excited to be able to offer that here in Manassas. So just wanted to let you know.
Thank you. It's wonderful.
Thank you, Mr. Gfeller, and it indeed is great news for our students. Before we move on to the next item under Spotlights, I have a few quick announcements. Each month, the Communications Office sends out notables for the division to remember. This week is National Arts and Education Week. Hispanic Heritage Month begins Friday through October 15th. It's also National Translation Month, National IT Professionals Month, National Suicide Awareness and Prevention Month, and Attendance Awareness Month. At this time, Board Member Jill Spall will share the board's proclamation regarding the importance of school attendance.
Hello, everyone. This is the Manassas City Public Schools Attendance Awareness Month proclamation. Whereas the nation is experiencing a school absenteeism crisis brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic and other challenges that have eroded positive conditions for learning at school, including physical and emotional health and safety, a sense of belonging, connection, and support, academic challenges and engagement, and adults and peers with social emotional competency, which motivates students and families to show up and engage. And whereas reducing chronic absence, which is missing 10% or more of school for any reason, requires taking a comprehensive, trauma-informed approach that starts with prevention and early intervention, including developing routines and trusting relationships that create a sense of belonging rather than responding with punitive action, which research finds is not particularly effective. And whereas the reduction of chronic absenteeism rates is a key performance indicator for student academic success in the Manassas City Public Schools 2022 to 2027 strategic plan, and whereas improving attendance and engagement takes schools, families, elected leaders, and other community partners working together to rebuild regular and trusting communications and to identify and address barriers to being in school, and whereas taking attendance daily in a caring, consistent manner is essential to identifying when students begin to miss too much school and for engaging students and families as early as possible with needed support and resources. And now, therefore, be it resolved that the school board of the City of Manassas stands with the nation in recognizing September as Attendance Awareness Month in Manassas City Public Schools, and hereby commits to a continued focus on reducing absenteeism and addressing the factors that cause students to miss school in order to ensure all children have an equitable opportunity to learn, grow, thrive academically, emotionally, and socially. Be it further proclaimed that we encourage students, families, educators, and the City of Manassas community to join us as we all show up to build an engaging school environment that motivates attendance and sends the message that learning can and must continue.
Thank you, Mrs. Spall. And just like to say, oh, Mrs. Brooks, can you hold that up again? These are some signs that you're going to be seeing around town in various places in front of our schools and city buildings, just as a reminder for families and for students to show up. And you can also use the hashtag #ShowUpManassas to further encourage people to show up for programming, for school every single day, every student every day. And more coming on that. Okay, thanks, Mrs. Spall. Before we go on to our agenda, I would like to acknowledge a few people in the audience tonight. We have MEA representatives, Ms. Higginbotham and Mrs. Potts, as well as the Commissioner of the Revenue, Mr. Tim DeMaria. We have, thank you for being here. We have no board committee reports, so I'm going to move on to citizens' comments. And we have Timmy DeMaria signed up. At this time, we welcome citizens who wish to speak about services, policies, and affairs of the City of Manassas Public Schools. Because we have an agenda we need to complete, we ask that comments be limited to 3 minutes. We appreciate the time you have come to be here. We treat citizens' comments as a public hearing, and we do not engage in conversation with speakers. The lack of an immediate response to your comments should not be taken as a lack of interest or concern. Please be respectful when delivering your comments. Start the timer, Mr. Hawkins.
She's looking right at me, too. I am Tim DeMaria. I am the Vice President of Osborne Alumni Association. That's who I am tonight. I have our alumni reverse raffle tickets, who Ms. Spall will have them as well, right? Don't you have a packet? Okay. The reverse raffle is October 21st. It's a great time for everybody. We're not selling nothing to the bus drivers. They're $100 a piece. It gets 2 people into the reverse raffle. We will have Tony's, we will have Zandra's, at least we have in the past, and another local restaurant. All the food you can eat. There will be a unlimited beverages of all sorts. You have about a 1 in 14 chance of winning your $100 back, and you have a 1 in 300 chance of winning $10,000. It's a great night. All of our money goes back to our scholarships for Osborne students. Last year we gave away $9,000. Over the life of our association, which goes back to 1905, we've given away over $150,000 in scholarship to Osborne kids. So we will also be honoring the Osborne Alumnus of the Year that night as well. So if anybody wants tickets to this, it's a great event. It's a high chance of winning, and it's a very, very fun night. And it goes to a very worthy cause. That's the first thing from the Alumni Association. The second thing, I'm here to announce for the first time publicly that tomorrow on our Facebook page, we'll be going live with our Athletic Hall of Fame applications. Osborne has been around since 1905, Osborne or under other names, since 1905, and we don't have our Hall of Fame yet. So Mr. Ellenberger charged the Alumni Association to do that. We got together with the boosters, the athletic boosters, and so if you go to the alumni page, which is osbornealumniassociation.com, I think is what it is, and scroll down, you can find information on our reverse raffle. You can find information and the applications for the Hall of Fame. Do I have any time left?
It hasn't beeped.
Yeah, you darn right it has. So if you have anybody in mind, and it goes all the way back to 1905, anybody that participated, you can read the application on our website. And I thought you didn't engage in conversation. You answered me. Thank you. Are there any questions? Can we engage in conversation? I guess that's
Thank you,
against the
Mr.
rules.
Maria.
Yes, ma'am.
Is there anyone else that wished to speak to the board tonight? Seeing and hearing none, we'll go on to our next agenda item, which is the consent agenda. May I have a motion, please?
Second.
I have a motion by Mrs. Brooks, seconded by Vice Chair Stevens, that the school board of the city of Manassas approve the consent agenda as presented. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 6-0. First up on our discussion agenda is student achievement and the Aviation Academy, presented by Ms. Christine Taylor.
I know, right? It's not for short people. Good evening, Chair Seberg, Vice Chair Stevens, Dr. Newman, and members of the Manassas City School Board. Thank you so much for having me. You know I love to share my love of CTE, and so, of course, it's a great night to be here in front of you. Tonight, we're going to talk a little bit about the Aviation Academy, how it began, a little historical perspective, what we've done for the last 2 years to work on it, and I'd be happy to answer any questions when I get through. The Aviation Academy is the perfect fit for our strategic plan. It fits with the vision of Manassas City Public Schools, as graduates will be prepared to maximize their potential as a member of the global community. 3 pillars of our strategic plan support our Aviation Academy. Inclusive and collaborative learning environment ensures that each student will feel safe and supported in interactive, innovative, and equitable environment where individual assets are valued and respected. The Aviation Academy supports the quality workforce pillar by providing instruction to students that will benefit from including a variety of diverse, high equity, high quality educators who are held accountable for making data-informed decisions and implementing best practices. Strong family and community partnerships prioritizes students being part of a system that supports building relationships with community businesses who encourage and support their academic and personal goals. A little bit of history and background. Mr. Gefeller and I were invited to meet with the director of the airport, Juan Rivera, about 2 years ago in the summer. It was right after we first started, and we were excited about the possibility of discussing a partnership. Juan Rivera, after that meeting, spearheaded a CTE Aviation Committee in the fall of 2021. We met for the first time, and it comprised of aviation businesses, Prince William, Manassas Park, and Manassas City Schools. The committee met throughout the last year and a half to talk about and discuss and identify the needs of businesses and the school systems and what the possibilities might be. Collectively, we hosted an Aviation Career Day last fall of 2022. The school systems presented possibilities to the Manassas Regional Airport Board in June of 2022, and the committee recently met to begin putting a formal plan in place. So let me tell you a little bit more about how we got there. We started to gather data. As with all things in education, we need to support our decisions by being transparent, doing our homework and our due diligence so that we make good decisions that are best for students. So laying the foundation over the past 2 years, we started to have strategic discussions with the Airport Aviation Committee for CTE. There have been approximately 25 members invited to the table. At any given time, most meetings have between 12 and 18 businesses in our discussions. We did student surveys. We got 1,508 responses from METS and OHS in the fall of 2021. We have Aviation Day surveys from students. There were 38 responses, which we'll talk about. We did a business survey, which we received 52 businesses who provided feedback to us. We've been in contact and in meetings with the Virginia Department of Education, the Trade and Industry Director, and then we made a tour to Denby Aviation Academy. And this is what we found through all the data, and I'll just do a simple summary of it, and if you have questions, I'm happy to dive into it. We had 38 students who participated in the Aviation Career Day. These students self-selected. These students signed up because they were interested in a career in aviation. They represented 7th through 12th grade from both Metz Middle School and Osborne High School. 50% of the students that attended were interested in a career as a pilot. 39.5% were interested in a career in airport security. 26.3% were interested in aviation mechanics, and those were the top three. The students who participated personally signed up. This year, we are hosting another aviation day for our students. We are working on a date in November, and hopefully in the next 2 weeks, we'll have that date firmed up. And of course, being the first go-around, the first time we've hosted an aviation career day for students, it was a learning experience, and we have lots of great ideas moving forward for this year. And of course, we hope to have even more students than we did last year, and we'll continue to advertise through our CTE programs, our career counselors, our school counselors, and on our websites. Our business survey data in the fall of last year posed 2 specific questions that were related to career and technical education that are appropriate for the Aviation Committee discussions. The first question is, when and if you hire someone out of high school, are they prepared to enter the workforce? 7 businesses said yes, 13 said no, and 28 said somewhat. So that provided a lot of feedback for us for the next question, which was, when hiring a student out of high school, which is more important to your company? Soft skills, technical or trade skills, or both are equally important? You can see that soft skills rated 28, so 56% stated that soft skills were most important. Both came in second at 18%. So I think it's safe to say we have some work to do. The student survey data from the fall of 2021, 1,495 responses per this particular question. On a scale of 1 to 5, how interested were they in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, which to help our students understand what that meant, what that pathway meant, we broke it out just to give them some examples. We had 429 students who rated very or extremely interested in an aviation career path. That's good news. Factors that were identified. So we took all of this data, we put it together. We are still in the process of gathering some additional data to support our decisions. But the 5 factors that came out loud and clear that we needed to incorporate in order to have a successful aviation academy, where each one had to have a work-based learning opportunity for students, early exposure to aviation careers, community, business, and school partnerships, multiple pathways to a career in aviation, and multi-school participation were all key factors in a successful program. So, a lot of meetings, lots of discussions that were all extremely positive and very supportive. Based on those discussions, we went to the Virginia Department of Education and we began to meet with them as a committee, as small groups, and there's been several meetings throughout the last 2 years. It was narrowed down that the 3 pathways which would best serve our students were flight operations, aviation mechanics, and aerospace engineering. There was a lot of popular votes for air traffic controller. However, VDOE at this time does not support those courses. They aren't created. Doesn't mean down the road we can't get there, because you have to have big ideas. So theory and practical teaching component, work-based learning, We need to think about dual enrollment options for these courses, multiple pathways, application process for students to apply, advisory committee to conduct a yearly evaluation, administrator to oversee the academy, school-based instruction, grades 7 through 10, and the Manassas Airport-based instruction, grades 11 and 12. A lot of this was also culminated from discussions throughout Northern Virginia of trade and industry programs that were successful in different school systems. To give you an example of what the pathways might look like, for flight operations, this includes manned and unmanned aircraft. The idea behind the Aviation Academy, grades 8, 9, and 10, the instruction would happen at their home-based school. It could be any or all or a mix of any of these classes, 8th, 9th, and 10th grade. So you'll see flight and space, engineering essentials, design modeling, robotics invention and innovation as options for 8th grade. That does not mean that Manassas City Public Schools would offer every one of those. However, we would offer several classes that students could choose from in their exploration. And the same would go for 9th and 10th grade. 11th and 12th grade, you'll notice that they would have instruction at the airport, and we would have specific classes on unmanned aircraft and pilot training. And then in 12th grade, a capstone for the unmanned aircraft, pilot training 2, and then you'll notice there's a spot on here for career strategies, which is the work-based learning component. That's where our students receive high school credit for enrolling in this class while doing work-based learning on site. Those capstone projects and those work-based learning opportunities would be done right at the airport in the individual hangars with different businesses and different companies. You'll also notice at the very bottom, you'll see a credential. The credentials are a win-win for VDOE as well as businesses. So the credentialing exams aren't one or the other. They are good for both. So we want something that's mutually beneficial for both parties. We want to steer our students in the right direction. We want to support them through VDOE, but we also want to support our businesses as we continue to grow our own. The final credentialing options would be discussed once the program details are ironed out. We still have a ways to go, but those will be done in cooperation with the Aviation Committee as well as VDOE. Aviation mechanic, you can see the pathway options there. Again, the credential would be defined once we get a little bit further on. And then aerospace engineering. Aerospace engineering, PLTW, which is Project Lead the Way. I'm sorry. Project Lead the Way. I had to think for a minute. And those credentialing exams do tie into Project Lead the Way. And so you will see that reflected in some of the credentialing pieces of it. We offer PLTW already here in Manassas City Public Schools. Our engineering program at the high school is very strong, as well as, of course, we have Dr. Goldzung, who is the nationally recognized PLTW administrator for Manassas City Public Schools, as well as the nation. So we're in good hands with PLTW. Space and needs options. This is very tentative, so please take it at that when you take a look at this. Manassas Regional Airport obviously is undergoing some major renovations to accommodate their new carrier status, which we're very excited about. I'm hoping that's going to be a win-win for Manassas City Public Schools, and I believe that it will. We need approximately 10,000 square foot hangar in order to pull off the Aviation Academy with the teaching, equipment, and infrastructure to run a successful program. That would include some office space as well. This space would obviously need to be tweaked and fit to the parameters of the classrooms. We're currently working with Mr. Juan Rivera on options and how we can partner for space. He is very amenable at this point in time to helping us with this proposal. And if you look on the bottom, you can see we need an administrative space, we need unmanned aircraft, manned aircraft, aerospace, engineering, mechanics is big, wind tunnel, that's bigger than the mechanics room, and then storage and office space. So hopefully we've included some of the things that we'll need, but again, very tentative and lots to be discussed. So where do we get all that space from? We went to tour Denby Aviation Academy. And so Denby Aviation Academy is within a high school. And they have a whole wing that is set up just for their aviation academy. And you can see, I just took a smattering of pictures. You can see with the unmanned aircraft, they have the drone circle set up. You can see on the bottom left, that's one of their aerospace engineering rooms. You can see a 3D printer. Here is the maintenance. And they had 3 small full planes in the maintenance wing there, and with 10,000 square feet, we could do that too. And so the students actually physically work on planes. You can see the workbenches and the tools and that sort of thing. So very, very exciting looking ahead at what the possibilities could look like. Oop, I skipped one. All right, proposed timeline. So when is all this going to happen? How do we see it all fitting together? I am very proud of the fact that we've made very conscientious, purposeful, and very strategic planning, discussion, and meetings. If we're going to do this, I want to do it well. I don't want to race through this and do haphazard of something that we can't sustain that doesn't benefit our students. And so you'll see that planning through year 2025, begin the Aviation Academy in 8th grade in the schools, 25-26, and of course, moving forward to get those students to the airport. So if you look on your bottom right-hand corner, you'll see that the aviation maintenance would be the first program at the Aviation Academy. And the reason for that is because Prince William currently has the program. And so they work with community businesses and partners in moving that program to get us started. The second phase would be flight operations, and the third phase would be the aerospace engineering. So tentatively, that's how we have it set up, and then the full implementation would be 2028-29. All right, and last, so partnerships. Partnerships from the aviation community, the businesses, will be vital to the success of the program. Continued discussions need to be had with all parties. Collectively, there have been many conversations with potential donors over the last 2 years that have been very positive in supporting the future workforce. There's a lot of opportunities for federal grants through the FAA. Some are very sizable and would definitely fit what we're looking at here and would be appropriate for us to look into. I also believe that in some initial research from the school systems that there's additional grant funding opportunities through private companies and businesses that are very interested in growing their own, and so they're willing to support schools in aviation career paths. And then last but not least, I just want to reiterate, this is definitely a phased-in approach. It is on a great progression forward. We meet regularly, and it's a collective effort. Not just is it Manassas City Public Schools, but it's Manassas Park and Prince William County Public Schools, but it's also our business community who has been unbelievably supportive in coming forward with supporting this aviation academy. It is not a current need that it is not a current program that we currently have to fill the need. I wanted to make sure that came out right. It's definitely a need in our community. We have a phenomenal resource here at the airport, and I feel like the potential for us to be true partners with our aviation community is right at our fingertips. And so I'm very excited moving forward. I also want to say thank you to Dr. Newman and Mr. Gefeller, because without their support, we wouldn't have even started these conversations 2 years ago. And as with all things career and technical education, it's not just one person, and I have a phenomenal team with Eric Godwin and Tara Eason. And so I just, a very public thank you for believing in this great idea and giving me the support that we need to move forward with it.
Well, thank you, Ms. Taylor. Any questions or comments from the board? Ms.
Sorry, go ahead. I don't have a question, but I have a comment. I remember a couple years ago you lighting up about the even thought about doing this program, and I think it is very exciting. And I love that our school system is beginning, well, we have begun offering our students so many different things. When we talk about kids and trying to get them excited for school, I talk to several 7th and 8th graders, and I share with them all the exciting opportunities they have at Osborne High School. And they really light up, and they are excited to then transition from 7th, 8th grade to high school, where they feel like the world is just opening up for them. So thank you for putting forth all that effort.
Oh, you're welcome. It's a joy.
Mrs. Brooks?
Well, part of what I was going to say is what Ms. Williams just said. But I also want to commend you and your team, because I see how hard the three of you work, as well as everyone involved in this system. And we talk about how we need to engage our students, and you guys are really offering them something that really does engage them on a real life, getting out there and being grown-ups. And I want to commend you all, so thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm very excited about this program.
Great.
Questions or comments? Mrs. Brescia?
Thank you very much. I'm also very excited. We're going to get 6 people up here saying how excited they are, and I am one of them. I did have a few questions. I noticed that we had 38 students attend the last year's fall. Was that the expected number of kids? Are we hoping to see more in the future?
Great question. So we didn't really have an expected number. That was the first time we've ever done an aviation career day. So we just went with whoever signed up. We encouraged our students. We advertised through teachers, the IMS program, both at METS and in the high school level. So we really didn't have a number that we were thinking of. But to say that we want to expand, absolutely.
Okay.
Because we want to open the students' eyes to what's out there and give them some opportunities.
Yes,
sure.
well, I was looking at some of these classes, and I didn't know what the standard class size is for unmanned aircraft. You know what I mean? So I
Right.
was wondering
Yeah.
where we were falling on that. And of course, I expect if it was open from 7th graders to 12th graders, you would expect the interest to kind of grow over time.
Absolutely.
So I'm excited to see where that goes. Back on the pathways. So you highlighted the 3 pathways that we are hoping to offer. Manassas Park and Prince William will also be participating in this. Are we all offering the same pathways? Yes, we are. Okay. So that negates my follow-up question on that. So we're all the same on that. The airport-based instruction, are we going to, I know it's 11th and 12th grade, so students might be able to drive themselves, but will we be providing
We'll be
a bus?
providing transportation.
Okay.
And again, those details have not been worked out. We're just not quite there yet, but we're close.
All right. And
More to come.
Yeah, so that is true. So I'll try to keep that in mind. I noticed that you mentioned Mr. Rivera a lot, and I'm very glad that you guys seem to have a really good relationship, and it's a lot of back and forth. But the airport, like any entity, there's a lot of commissions, committees, other things like that. Are we sending liaisons to those, other commissions and things like that, just so we can stay a part of the conversation if they decide they want to use our wind tunnel space or something like that?
I have to be transparent. We have not gotten that far yet.
Okay.
Right now, the CTE Aviation Committee has been rock solid. And I think many of them are represented on the other committees as well. And I'll defer to Juan Rivera for that. If he would like us to participate in those, we will absolutely be present at the table. I think without an official program in place, it might be too early to tell who's going to want to borrow things or who's going to want to work with things or what have you. So that's
All right. I mean, as
on
long
the
as
radar.
Yeah,
for
as long
sure.
as we have a seat continuously at the table so
Yeah.
that our space doesn't
Yeah.
get gobbled up with, they
Yes.
have a lot going on there right now with
Yeah.
the carrier status and all that stuff.
sure.
So I want to make sure nobody forget about the public schools.
Yeah.
Okay, we need our space there.
I think they love us. I'm pretty sure.
Well, there you go. Well, that's
Yeah.
great news. And my last question was going to be, what kind of budgetary commitment do we need to be keeping in mind? But I suspect the answer is going to be it's too early to tell, but I'm going to let you have a chance to
It
say
is.
that.
It's a little too early to tell. I think the most promising piece of this is that there's quite a bit of grant funding available. We also have our regular Perkins programs, or Perkins grants, which provides equipment for different programs. For example, our Certified Nurse Aid program, the last 2 years has used a good amount of our Perkins money to provide equipment to make sure that the classroom is up to date, it's modern, and we have what we need to successfully get our students certified as nurse aides at the end of the school year. So I anticipate that those Perkins funds would be used as well to support some of the equipment that we would need at the airport. And then I do believe that our businesses have made many verbal commitments. I think the next step on our end is to get some commitment letters from those businesses so that we can just move a little bit more formally forward. So working on some agreements, working on some commitment letters so that we know where we need to go down the road.
Thank you. I appreciate your diligence in this, grants and donations that really expands what we are able to do. So, thank you for your efforts making these connections in the community and for all those meetings. You referenced a lot of meetings. So, thank you for undertaking that effort. That's all for me.
Mrs. Spall.
Yes. I've had the occasion to sit in on some of the airport CTE committee meetings, and I can say that this really is a build it and they will come situation, but I have every confidence that they will come. But this is ground up, and I can say that Ms. Taylor is very respected in the collective effort. She's basically leading the way in all of it from my perspective, but with the Manassas Park and the Prince William trifecta, if you will, she's planting the seeds with the businesses and things like that. So my question, which you basically answered, but maybe even more enthusiastically, you might be able to say, do you anticipate any major funding obstacles? Because it looks like you're pretty excited about funding opportunities.
I am, and I absolutely, with enthusiasm, do not feel that we are going to have a major financial commitment from our school system. I believe that by the time, I don't want to name any businesses, but many of the big businesses who are looking for pilots, looking for unmanned pilots, engineers, et cetera, have supported our STEM programs for quite some time. And I feel like once this particular program is at the forefront, that much of that funding will possibly be channeled back through to an aviation academy. And so the support from our community, from our major corporations and businesses has been rock solid for many years for STEM. So very, very positive, very optimistic.
So timing in all of this is crucial, but I think it's correct. And we are planting seeds for the future. So there are going to be obviously some unknowns, but 2028 is so far and so close. We appreciate all that you're doing, and we know that you've got a great support network as well. But this is really big news.
Thank you, Mrs. Spall. Your support of this, being part of the aviation committee and attending the meetings has been really appreciated.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you. Vice Chair Stevens.
Thank you. Hi, Ms. Taylor. You actually started this presentation with us back in July with the academic committee, and I see you've added to it, refined it since then, so it was kind of cool to see the new information that you presented tonight. And I know we had a really robust conversation about it back in front of the academic committee where you really answered quite a few questions. So I'm not going to ask those questions. Just real quick, we have other programs like the nursing program, the junior ROTC, where we kind of share space with some of the Prince William County schools. Are you foreseeing that we might do that, like possibly have some classes at Osborne and maybe some at one of the other high schools so that we don't have to find, for lack of a better term, all that space ourselves?
That's an excellent question, and it's actually been at the table. We've had some preliminary discussion about it. Many of the courses for 7th, 8th, even I know 7th isn't in there, but we do offer some of the elective courses at the middle school level through our technology education program. But 8th, 9th, and 10th grade, many of those classes, most of our school systems already offer.
Okay.
We don't offer all of them, but we offer enough for student choice, student voice. And then for 11th and 12th grade, since it would be at the airport, our thought process behind it was if we offered them at the airport, then we wouldn't have to try and fund teachers for all 3 school systems, especially with Prince William being the size that it is in multiple high schools. For Manassas City, it's a win-win, and for Manassas Park it is as well. I think actually I could speak for all of us in having those upper level classes with just one instructor out at the airport. Or if we grow big, you know, we could have more than one instructor.
And I had asked this question before, and I did want to ask it again because I think it's kind of important, and because we have some 5th and 6th grade administrators in the back of the building, we know, and they both pick their heads up. What? Some of our students, you know, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade, they're not quite sure what they want to do, and they really haven't figured out who they are and where their direction is till high school. Sometimes 9th, 10th grade. So, do older students who are a little bit farther along have the ability to join into the program later as opposed to right at 7th grade?
Absolutely. I think we would have to really focus our efforts to get them in at the 9th or 10th grade level before we get to the upper level classes because of the prereqs that'll be required. I do want to address it though because it's such a great question. We are working really hard this school year to implement, I have a meeting coming up here with the intermediate schools to implement some CTE programming at the younger level. We have put on the table a CTE night here at Manassas City Public Schools so we can showcase our programs. Date to be determined, but we're also working with a lot of our courses at the high school level with some work-based learning opportunities to combine efforts that night to showcase CTE for all of our families. Last year, if you remember, we had STEM night at Weems, which was a huge success, which I'm sure we're going to go ahead and do again. But I think slowly but surely as I get a little bit grounded, my calendar gets a little freer, we've started to take on some additional programming opportunities for our families. Because you're right, if we don't start opening doors for students at a younger age about career possibilities, we aren't going to be any further ahead than we are now. And so we want what's best for kids. What's best for kids often takes lots of work, which we're ready to do, which we already do. And so to just maybe possibly expand some CTE opportunities, invite families to programs where we can showcase what we have, and at 2nd or 3rd grade they can remember, oh my gosh, I remember when Mr. Weaver's class built a house, or I remember being in Mr. Riley's shop and I saw all the trucks up there. I remember being in Miss De Leon's cosmetology program and them cutting hair, you know. So you want those memories and you want those experiences to start gathering steam so that by the time they are in intermediate, middle school level, they can start to narrow down the things, the skills and talents they have that they're really good at.
And so the preliminary classes, like at the 7th and 8th grade level, those really can be applied to different CTE programs later on. If, let's say, we get to 9th grade and we're like, I don't really want to do this, I want to go in this direction. Sure. Those still count as those foundational classes that can be applied to any one of the CTE directions.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, they're exploratory. You know, middle school, as you know, being in education, all of you, middle school is exploratory. And so we want students to try all kinds of different classes. What do they like to do? What do they decide they don't want to do? And then being able to connect those pieces with the possibilities for what lie ahead. So that's one of the best parts of middle school and intermediate school programming.
So, yeah, so thank you. I think we're all looking forward to this. This is an opportunity for our students. And it's an opportunity for those kiddos who want to go right to work out of high school, that they'll be able to, and they'll be truly that workforce ready. So thank you. And thank you for all the work and all the planning. And I'm sure we all look forward to hearing more and more as the plan evolves and comes together. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Ms. Taylor.
Next up on our discussion agenda, Dr. Ed Stevenson, Director of Instruction, will provide an update on the Virginia Literacy Act and resource adoption timeline.
Good evening, Chair Seaberg, Vice Chair Stevens, members of the board, and Dr. Newman. I'm pleased to have the opportunity to provide you with an update on the Virginia Literacy Act, or VLA. It was passed by the Virginia legislature in 2022 and focuses on improving literacy outcomes for all students in the Commonwealth, kindergarten through 8th grade. The VLA requires the Virginia Department of Education to recommend instructional programs for literacy, including core instructional resources in grades K through 5, supplemental programs in grades K through 8, and intervention materials for approval by the Virginia Board of Education. This presentation will focus on core resources we must adopt to comply with the 24-25 rollout of the VLA. While our literacy practices in MCPS align with the practices promoted by the VLA, approved resource adoption has emerged as a need that requires our prompt attention. Starting in August 2024, all Virginia school districts will need to ensure that every student in grades K through 3 receives literacy instruction from a state-approved curriculum for the entirety of the literacy block. Every teacher of students in grades K through 3 will have to use state-approved core instructional resources, and every teacher of students in grades K through 3 will have to be provided with pre-service preparation and/or in-service training in state-approved literacy instruction. When I say state-approved, I mean approved by the Virginia Literacy Partnership, or VLP. The VLP has been chosen by the Virginia Department of Education and Board of Education to review materials and programs and determine if they meet the requirements of the Act. This summer, the VLP released a list of approved core instructional programs for K through 3 students, which is pictured on this slide. As you can see, our current K through 6 instructional literacy program, Scholastic Literacy, did not make the approved list. This was an unexpected development, as Scholastic Literacy's program does address phonics, reading comprehension, fluency, and vocabulary, and has a long history of meeting state expectations for resource adoption. We have found Scholastic Literacy to be especially effective in recent years when paired with supplemental resources from the Institute for Multisensory Education and Hegarty's Phonological and Phonemic Awareness curriculum. We reached out both to the VLP and the VDOE about our options in July. We stressed that we are currently using an assortment of programs to address foundational reading skills and asked if we could use this approach to meet the requirements of the Virginia Literacy Act. We were told that we cannot use multiple resources together to serve as our core instructional program unless they are on the state-approved list. We were informed that because Scholastic Literacy was not approved by the VDOE, that we will need to adopt a K through 3 core instructional program from the approved list for the 24-25 school year. So, this timeline that I'm about to present to you helps to put our current situation into context. So in 2019, we adopted or began the process of adopting literacy materials. That was our last regular cycle adoption. Sorry, I'm having a little trouble with the clicker. In 2020, we selected Scholastic Literacy on a 7-year contract. We also began IMSE, that's the Institute for Multisensory Education, training with our K through 12 special education teachers and literacy coaches. In 2021, we added letters training for literacy coaches and specialists, and we expanded IMSE training. In 2022, the VLA passed in the General Assembly, and the VDOE set out a plan for school divisions to improve early literacy, and the things we were doing with IMSE, the letters cohort, the UVA reading specialist cohort, all aligned with the practices and the recommended approaches in the Act. Then in 2023, as in just recently, in July, VDOE posted the approved literacy K through 3 resource list. And at that point, we saw that Scholastic was not on the approved list. And that brings us to where we are now. We have this approved list, and by 2024, we have to have a resource, a core resource that is state approved So where does this leave us? We have a plan. I do want to stress that our approach right now still aligns with the research-based practices that are required by the VLA. But this smaller K through 3 approved list of resources is going to require us to adapt our plan and our practices moving forward. So on this slide, you can see an overview of the literacy resource adoption timeline for primary materials that we plan to use this school year to make sure that we are ready for their effective implementation by the fall of 2024. Supplemental and intervention materials have not yet been named by VDOE for schools to consider. We do expect that IMSE will be one of the approved resources, as it is grounded in the Orton-Gillingham methodology. We do plan to continue the use of IMSE, Hagerty, and Scholastic literacy to the extent permitted by law, as they remain excellent resources. I also want to stress that because the state is rolling out the plan in segments, that there are additional things that will need to be approved by the state that we can't act on until we hear from them. So they've only approved K through 3. They haven't approved supplemental resources yet. They haven't approved resources for grades 4 and 5 yet. So this process we're sharing with you now is one we may have to engage in again as the state continues to release additional information about approved programs and resources. Okay, so I'd like to end this presentation with just a few thoughts to frame our current situation. While the development with Scholastic was unexpected, we are still in a very strong position when it comes to literacy instruction and support. The philosophy and approach we are using is supported by the same principles and research that are driving the VLA, and the combination of resources that we have been using from Scholastic, IMSE, and Hagerty will only make our literacy instruction and support stronger with the adoption of a state-approved core instructional program. By moving forward with the plan I have outlined for you tonight, we can make sure our school division continues to be on track to comply with the VLA while continuing to meet the literacy needs of our students. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the board? Mrs. Brooks?
I had a question and then you answered it. But thank you. I enjoy seeing all the different, that they're putting the work in, and yes, we'll have to shift gears with the Scholastic not making it, but thank you, and I trust you guys will make the right decision and keep us informed.
Absolutely.
Mrs. Williams, did you have anything?
Yes, Ms. Chair. How are you?
I am fine.
Thank you for your presentation. So back in 2020, when we went through the process of choosing the program we wanted to use, I know you're new, and you may not remember or know, there were several options that a large group of people, committee, worked hard together to choose what we chose. Teachers, do you find, I'm not sure if this particular program is new, or what the state is going to allow us to use, or if it has been around for a while. Do you know?
Are you talking about Scholastic literacy or the
other
6
options.
programs they have on their list?
The 6 programs on our list.
So
You may not know.
the dates on those programs are all very recent.
Okay.
So what you need to remember, what I would stress is that while some of the publishers of these programs have been around for a long time, they're always updating their resources. And so many of them, in anticipation of the review process, did update their programs to make sure that they were compliant with what the Act required.
Okay, and has this, clearly we know why the state is taking so much control over the state of Virginia and their reading and their literacy. In the past several years, I suspect this is really due to a lot of the neurological studies that have been done on how children learn, and perhaps the new programs that they want us all to use are kind of a result from those studies, that they are best suited for our youngest students and be able to reach all of our learners in the way they learn so differently.
So if you look at the law, it requires the programs to be research-based, and the state evaluates them according to what the law says. And so that's where the VLP's process comes into play, and they look at several criteria, but they're criteria that have been around for a long time when it comes to effective reading instruction. Things like phonemic awareness, phonological awareness, phonics instruction, decoding, reading comprehension, vocabulary, fluency, those kinds of key foundational literacy skills.
Okay, thank you for clarifying and helping me understand all those things.
Ms. Brezia?
Thank you for the presentation. I do try to send my questions ahead of time, but I was like, I need to just let him talk and then I will see, because this is my very first resource adoption process. So I'm excited to be part of this. I am wondering first, what happens to our 7-year contract with Scholastic?
Well, we still do intend to use those resources to the extent that we can.
So we kind of have to double contract a little. Like, we still have the materials, but we
Yes,
have
we
to
do.
contract over a period of time. We weren't initially planning on doing that. Well, it's not on the list, so that's what has to happen, right? So I do thank you you mentioned that you did do a follow-up call with the state to see if we could prevent this double contract situation. So thank you for thinking of doing that. Sorry it did not work out. In our, I heard a little bit about how we came to the selection of Scholastic to begin with. Do we have any insight as to why it was not selected?
We don't. The state only released information on their evaluation of approved resources. They didn't release any information about their evaluation of resources that didn't make the list.
And what is their process? Like, what were they?
So if you go to the Virginia Literacy Partnership page, they have rubrics and criteria. They do have reading experts that are looking at these materials. And you'll also see that the state occasionally puts out calls to involve more people with expertise in literacy in the review process.
And I noticed on the 23-24 plan for literacy resource adoption that Form Resource Adoption Committee was for September 2023, which is now. So I was wondering if that committee's already been formed. Have you guys met? How is that going?
So we haven't formed any committees yet. We wanted to first share our process with the board. But yes, we are about to embark on this process. It's a shortened version of our regular adoption process, because we want to make sure that all those steps are followed.
Who is involved? Who becomes committee members typically? How does that happen?
So we work together in our office to pick committee members from schools and key stakeholders to look at that ahead of also making sample resources available to the public.
Gotcha. All right. Well, thank you very much for this informative presentation. I think you're new here, new to MCPS, and I am sorry that you have to now redo something that was done already due to circumstances outside of all of our control. But yeah, thank you for taking that on.
Mrs. Spall, anything?
I suppose the main question that I have is just the 7-year contract. Is that something that we'll probably be revising? I mean, I'm assuming it's cost savings to sign on with somebody for that long.
I can't give you anything really detailed on contract right at the moment. That is something we've had a conversation with the publisher about. All I can really say at this point is our intention is to use the resources as much as we can.
Okay. Yeah, I know, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Vice Chair Stevens.
Thank you. I'm going to get a little bit meaty and maybe down the rabbit hole, because this is what I do during the day. So this is a big thing for me. My first question, so the Virginia Literacy Act goes into effect for the 2024-2025 school year. And I don't know if this aligns with it, but whenever the SOL, the standards of learning, are updated, there's usually a crosswalk year, which is like a transition year. Will we have that transition year, or do we have to hit the ground running at the start of the 2024-2025 school year?
We have to hit the ground running.
Okay. And we weren't, these resources, the approved resources, were not shared with us until July.
Correct.
So we have to move very quickly on this.
We really do. Yeah, there have been a few situations where normal crosswalk timelines and normal timelines that we've become accustomed to have been shortened or completely changed. And this would be an example of that.
This would be one of those
Yeah.
timelines. And so right now, we only know the approved resources for K through 3. Do we have a timeline for when the 4 through 6, 4 through 8 approved resources will be available?
We do not have a precise one. We didn't have a precise one even for K3. We check every month. We watch everything that comes out of VDOE. We're hopeful we'll get something by mid-year at the latest. But at the end of the day, we have to
move quickly.
We have to move quickly, but we also have to both move quickly, and sometimes we have to wait before we can move quickly.
Right, and we have to move very carefully. Sorry, I have questions kind of written all over the place here. The approved resource list, have we started looking at those resources to kind of narrow it down a little bit? Because 6 doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're talking about a reading curriculum, because I'm assuming that's what those are, that is a huge, meaty thing. Have we started to narrow down which ones are appropriate for our division?
So we haven't eliminated anything yet.
Okay.
But we have begun to look at the state's evaluation of the resources. They did provide some information, some narrative information, as well as some ratings along key pieces of criteria that we can use to judge the program's effectiveness even before we dive into the details. But yeah, that's we're in the process of getting that started.
So our goal is to have our final decision in November, then December process selection purchase. If we're using a new curriculum, which is essentially what we'll be doing, we have to train our staff. And we have to have them trained between January and early next August. Are we starting to put together a plan or a timeline or a system for that? Because I'm going to assume at K through 3, that's going to be all of our teachers.
So there are already training components around there are already training components going on around the principles and the research-based practices that the VLA requires. A lot of it is state mandated. We've also supplemented with trainings, and I gave some examples in the presentation that we're bringing our teachers into. So we don't anticipate that when we make the adoption decision that we'll be at square one with that, if that makes sense. If we need additional training to be done between the adoption and the fall, then at that point we will assess our needs and we'll do that. That's part of why we want the shortened timeline, is that gives us time from the final decision being made between then and the opening of school the next year to make those plans and put them in place.
And then, so thank you for that. And then letters, UVA, and IMSE, those are not approved, but nothing's been said about whether or not we'll be able to use them supplementally.
Not yet, no. We're still waiting for the list of supplemental materials.
We don't have a timeline for that, do we?
Not a specific one, no.
Okay. So we're kind of under the gun on that. But the VLA, the Virginia Literacy Act, is really grounded in the Orton-Gillingham approach, that science-based, the research-based. And so all of those 6 approved resources, those are all Orton Gillingham-based approaches?
So Orton Gillingham, that name is not necessarily featured in the act
Right,
or the
right.
evaluation, but yes, the principles and the research upon which those methodologies are based, what's being termed and used a lot or branded a lot as science of reading is, yes, it is behind and driving the evaluation of the materials.
Okay. And one last question, I hope one last question. Will the Virginia Literacy Act be impacting our upper grades, or is it really that K through 6, K through 8?
So ultimately, initially it'll just be K through 3, then K through 5 for primary core resources, but it will have an impact K through 8 because it does recommend resources, supplemental resources, and intervention materials through that grade level.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you for bringing this to us and sharing this information with us, and I wish you luck and the rest of the adoption team/committee. And then once you choose the resource, that will be made available to the public to look at prior to final adoption.
Yes.
Okay, and then once that happens, you'll notify the public. So it will be available at central office, and anyone can come in. I would assume they would need to call in advance.
Yes, we haven't worked out exactly how we're going to have that process work, but when we communicate that to the public, we'll communicate how they can review materials.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, and thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you, Dr. Stevenson. And I will commend you for adapting in the situation, as Dr. Newman talked about at Convocation. When changes happen like this, we had a process, the rules changed, we will adapt, and we will continue on. We'll still go through our process. We'll just might have to hurry it along a little bit this year. So thank you very much.
Yep, thank you.
Okay, next up on the discussion agenda is student achievement. Jennifer Casada, Dr. Casada, our Director of Strategic Improvement and Accountability, and Mr. Craig Gefeller, Executive Director of Student Achievement, will provide an update on the strategic plan focused on student academic success.
All right, good evening, Chair Seberg, Vice Chair Stevens, school board members, and Dr. Newman. Tonight, I will be providing an update on student performance data that have been recently released by the Virginia Department of Education. When I finish, Mr. Gefeller will discuss the MCPS strategic response to these data. On Thursday of last week, VDOE updated school quality profiles with a variety of data from the 22-23 school year to include SOL pass rates, accreditation data, and graduation data. That day, the governor and VDOE held a press conference about the SOL data. Their press conference focused on learning loss in reading and mathematics, as well as the impact of chronic absenteeism. Key findings we will share tonight include the fact that our SOL data show a need for an acceleration of learning. Neither MCPS nor the state has rebounded back to pre-pandemic performance levels, but there are some cause for optimism. MCPS has seen some growth in 22-23 compared to the previous year, as well as compared to the state, especially with our English learners. Tonight's presentation provides the big picture for MCPS in our schools. It is impossible in one presentation to dig deep into all of the components, particularly for accreditation. Subsequent presentations will dive into the details and various components of the accreditation system. At the conclusion of the data portion of the presentation, Mr. Gefeller will share instructional responses to the data in line with the MCPS strategic plan. He will focus on work to strengthen the inclusive and collaborative learning environment pillar, including the importance of aligned foundational supports. At future meetings, specific school teams will present about some of their successes as well as specific challenges related to the data we're sharing tonight. So the first section of this presentation, there's 3 sections of the data part of the presentation. The first will be SOL performance. So I'm going to share some SOL pass rate data. It's important to note that these pass rates represent pretty close to raw data, meaning the % of students who pass the given assessments in particular areas. We're going to focus on reading and math tonight, since those are specifically called out in our strategic plan. Comparisons of our performance to the state are included, as well as some data comparing this year to last year. It's important to note also that the VDOE school quality profiles include data for the past 3 years and also include data in different content areas beyond what we're going to cover tonight. We're going to look at division and school level data for reading and mathematics. We will then look at how MCPS is starting to close some gaps with the state in grades 3 through 6 and with end of course reading in Algebra 1, and we will end this section of the presentation by looking at cohorts of students over time.
All right, now we get to charts and graphs. The first slide here shows the performance of MCPS in comparisons to overall state averages. Performance is shown for 21-22 and 22-23. This chart includes overall performance, moving from left to right, overall performance as well as the performance of our English learners, our students with disabilities, and economically disadvantaged students. In all of the comparisons, MCPS is the set of 2 bars on the left with Virginia on the right. The blue bars that you see represent 21-22 performance, and the red bars represent 22-23 performance. While MCPS is still behind the state overall, our English learners are performing better than the state average. And in addition, all of the groups shown demonstrated an increase in performance from 21-22 to 22-23, which was not the case statewide. This next slide shows the overall SOL reading pass rates by school for the 21-22 and 22-23 school years. Again, the blue bars represent 21-22 and the red bars represent 22-23. We'll delve more into the elementary school data later in the presentation. Grade 3 reading is the reason for the decreases shown at the elementary school, and we'll talk about that. Improvement was shown at both intermediate schools and the high school, and performance did decline at the middle school in both grade 7 and 8. The next 2 slides parallel what I just showed, but for mathematics. The chart on this slide again compares MCPS with the state for overall performance as well as for English learners, students with disabilities, and economically disadvantaged students. You can see that unlike reading, all groups for MCPS and the state both showed improved pass rates from 21-22 to 22-23. Obviously, achievement gaps exist, most noticeably for our English learners and our students with disabilities compared to our overall performance. All right, this slide is just like for reading, but it's the performance in mathematics by school. This slide has some encouraging trends for most of our schools. Double-digit gains in pass rates were shown at Baldwin Elementary, Hayden Elementary, and Mayfield Intermediate School, my apologies. School leadership teams have been digging into the reading and math data at the school level, as well as by test and by student group, to identify those areas most in need of support and improvement as they are finalizing their continuous improvement plans. Also, students in grades 3 through 8 have been and are completing the fall Virginia Growth Assessments, which will provide our school leaders and teachers with up-to-date information about their student needs. All right, this next slide provides us with another way to look at the data, focusing on performance in grades 3 through 6 in both reading and mathematics. I want to explain what we're seeing on this slide because it's a little different. As I mentioned at the outside, MCPS has tended to lag behind state averages. So this slide allows us to look at the gaps between MCPS and the state and how those gaps are changing in the past 2 years. So data are shown for grades 3 through 6 in reading and math. The numbers you see represent the gap or difference between MCPS and the state. The darker blue bars show the gap that was there in 21-22, and the lighter blue bars show the gaps in 22-23. With the exception of grade 3 reading, you can see that the gaps decreased in 22-23 from the previous year. So both MCPS and Virginia as a whole saw decreases in grade 3 reading scores in 22-23. The decrease for MCPS was slightly larger than the state. That led to a 4-point increase in the gap. Overall, 72 of the divisions in Virginia decreased their 3rd grade reading pass rates, just as an FYI. In contrast, for grade 3 math, MCPS increased our pass rate by 9 points compared to a 2-point increase from the state, which then led to a 7-point decrease in the gap. The biggest decreases in gaps came in grade 3 math, grade 5 math, and grade 6 math. You will note that in grade 6 math, MCPS is actually now 2 points higher than the state, which is why that gap is in the negative. All right, this slide shows some parallel comparisons, but for some of our end-of-course exams. We focus here on these particular tests for a variety of reasons. First, they are the reading and math exams, so that is consistent with our other comparisons. In addition, high school students now only take SOL exams until they earn the necessary verified credits in a given subject or to meet federal participation requirements. Federal accountability requirements dictate that students must participate and take the end-of-course reading test, the Algebra 1 test, and the biology test. Once students pass those tests, they are not allowed to take subsequent tests in a given content area. This means that student scores in subjects like chemistry, geometry, and Algebra 2 must be interpreted with caution, as students who've previously passed tests in those subject areas are not taking them anymore. So, for example, students only take the geometry or Algebra 2 test if they have not passed the Algebra 1 test, or if they need to take a math test while in high school to meet a federal requirement. Thus, reading and Algebra 1, along with biology, are the only tests that make sense to compare at this point because that's where you have sufficient numbers of students taking the exams. For Algebra 1, which includes students at both the middle and high school, MCPS improved performance by 9 points compared to a 2-point gain at the state. So you can see where that the decrease in the gap happened. All right, if you recall, we provided this cohort analysis last year for the first time. It's important for us to compare performance as we've been doing, looking at third grade in one year to third grade in the next year, but we also need to look at how cohorts of students perform over time. This slide is color-coded to help you see the cohorts of students and their performance over the past 3 years, from 2020-21 through 22-23. It is not a true longitudinal analysis since students may have moved into or out of the schools, but it captures the trend data for groups of students as they move through the grades. Let me walk through some of the cohorts. The blue cohort was in grade 3 in 2020-2021, grade 4 in 21-22, and grade 5 in 22-23. You will see that the pass rates for this group of students continue to increase year over year. The green cohort was in grade 4 in 2020-21, grade 5 in 21-22, and grade 6 in 22-23. This cohort made the biggest gains, most notably in mathematics, which parallels what we saw in the gap analysis. Now, the yellow cohort moved from grade 5 in the first year to grade 6 in 21-22 and grade 7 in 22-23. This cohort had a pass rate in reading that dropped slightly and a pass rate in math that dropped more. However, the mathematics numbers only include students taking the grade 7 mathematics test, not students taking algebra, and the orange cohort shows similar patterns. Again, this only shows performance of students in grade 8 math, not algebra or geometry. It will be important for us to dive deeper into the mathematics performance at middle grades to understand the trajectory of students at all levels, from kids taking 7th grade math, 8th grade math, into algebra and geometry, so we can understand how those students are achieving, as well as the core sequences that are aligned to support them. Subsequent presentations will dig into middle and high school mathematics courses, performance, and trajectories. The purple cohort shows students in grades 3 in 21-22 and grade 4 in 22-23. We don't have a third year for that cohort yet, but like the blue and green cohorts, this one shows an encouraging trend. Okay. All right, that was section 1. Section 2 of the presentation is focused on accreditation data. So we got to do a little bit of history and background before we jump into the data. The Virginia accreditation system is multifaceted. If you recall, I presented in June about the accreditation system and its various components. I'm not going to repeat everything from that presentation, but there's some things that are important to help us understand what we're going to see. This chart is included to show you which indicators are included for which levels of our schools. So English and math achievement and achievement gaps, which is basically student group performance in English and math, are included at all levels. Science is included for our intermediate, middle, and high schools because there's only science tests at grades 5, 8, and our end of course tests. And chronic absenteeism, of course, is included at all levels. Now, the high school has 3 unique indicators. The first is the Graduation and Completion Index, which is a weighted index that gives points for students graduating on time, those staying in school, earning a GED, etc. The second is the dropout rate. So that's, of course, the percentage of students who drop out before completing high school. And the third is new this year and is the College Career and Civic Readiness Indicator, and that's a mouthful. It's all shortened to the CCCRI. This looks at the percentage of graduating students who have completed an AP or dual enrollment class or have completed CTE requirements, which means either finishing a sequence, a particular sequence, or completing work-based learning. Now, future presentations are going to delve into the details of the high school indicators, most specifically the College Career and Civic Readiness Indicator. Since it's a new one, we want to delve into and show you where, how we did as a school division and Osborne did in each of those components. All right, so those are the indicators. What are the ratings? So here are the possible ratings schools can receive, except for new schools, which I didn't show because we don't have any new schools. First, accredited. This means a school has all indicators at level 1 or level 2. In addition, schools have been granted triennial or 3-year accreditation based on their past accreditation status can receive the level of accredited. Which people like to call fully accredited, but the state, of course, changed that a few years ago. So I'm going to slip sometimes and say fully accredited. The next level is accredited with conditions, and this means the school has 1 or more level indicators at level 3. And then finally, accreditation denied. So this is for schools that fail to adopt or fully implement required corrections that are identified right through an academic review process that happens for schools that are accredited with conditions. Schools with this designation can regain regular or full accreditation by demonstrating that they're implementing these required corrective action plans, and of course, by improving up to level 1 and level 2 in all indicators. Now remember, I showed you earlier SOL pass rates, and if you remember back in June, gold stars for remembering that there's different ways we can do calculations, right? So the first we showed were pretty much raw pass rates, number of kids take the test, divided by the number of kids who passed the test, divided by number of kids who took the test, you get a percentage. Accreditation looks at things a little bit differently because there's an accountability component. So it's important for us to understand how the scores are assigned in a different way than what we talked about before. First, accreditation ratings are based on something called a combined rate, which takes pass rates and adds in the percent of students making growth on the SOL assessments and those English learners making progress at English proficiency, of course in English only. In addition, schools can get some kind of extra credit in something called remediation recovery for students who have failed the test in 1 year and passed the next year's test. Example, a student who failed the grade 3 mathematics test in 22 and passed in grade 4 and 23, and who participate in specific remediation would count twice for the school. In addition, there are other adjustments to the calculations before pass rates are calculated. They make adjustments to take out failing scores for English learners who've been here for less than 11 semesters and for transfer students who come into the school division after the 20th day of instruction or the 20th hour of instruction for high school students. It's important to note that's for transfers into the division. If we have a student move from Dean to Hayden, that transfer adjustment does not apply. I want to take one more minute to fully explain how that combined rate calculation works. Students count in the numerator by passing, showing growth, or showing progress in learning English in the English area only. So if we look at this chart, you see a picture with 10 students. If you look at it first, there are 6 of the students that show as green, and they pass the state assessment. So that would mean a 60% pass rate if we had 10 out of the 10. Another one of the students showed growth, and another one showed English learner progress, which gets you up to 8 out of 10. So the combined rate would be 80% compared to a 60% pass rate. So that's how the combined rate works in a nutshell. It's really important to note, though, that the growth only applies in grades 3 through 8 due to the nature of the vertical scale. For high school, since the tests are standalone tests, and like the English test is only given once in high school, and it's not on the vertical scale, growth is not applicable at the high school level. So the high school doesn't get that bonus in their combined rate. Remediation recovery is also based on tests that are sequential, which is why you don't really see it for high school either. High school has all the extra indicators, and they don't get the benefit of growth. Anyway, so the next two slides provide us some data for each school and how the components of the combined rates in English and mathematics work. This first slide is for English. It's important to note that English includes both reading and writing, but only at middle and high school do we have writing, right? Because there's now only a grade 8 writing test and an end of course writing test. So the combined rate, as we saw, includes multiple components, which are shown in the stacked bars on this chart and the next. Also, due to the adjustments to the accreditation calculations, the pass rate, so what you see in the blue section of the stacked bar, will be different than the SOL pass rates we discussed earlier. I didn't mess up the math, they just are different calculations. So just to walk you through it, the blue part of the bar, the blue part of the bar for each school represents the passing component. The red is the remediation recovery, green is growth, and purple is English learner progress, and then you see the total number at the top. Again, as mentioned earlier, growth is not really possible at high school since there's only one reading and one writing test, and the growth measures are built for grades 3 through 8 because they're all now on a vertical scale. Okay. And also it's important to note that growth in grade 3 was analyzed based on comparisons to the fall growth assessment, but growth in grades 4 through 8 was compared to the previous spring. Because of course there is no grade 2 SOL, grade 3 it's based on the fall. This next slide is the same as the last one, but for mathematics. You will notice here there's no purple on this slide, as the English learner progress only applies in English. So you again can see what the blue where passing rate would be, the remediation recovery, as well as the growth. And you can see that a good percentage of our elementary and intermediate school students did demonstrate growth, both on the chart before and this one. All right. This next slide includes our accreditation ratings for each of our schools. These rating designations are the same as last year, with all elementary and intermediate schools accredited and the middle and high school accredited with conditions. METS was identified at level 3 for both science and chronic absenteeism. Last year they were identified for science. Remember, last year chronic absenteeism did not count in accreditation ratings. Osborne was identified for achievement gaps in math and chronic absenteeism. Last year they were identified for dropout rate. They are no longer identified for dropout rate. We'll talk about that in the graduation section. Now, chronic absenteeism is a challenge at all levels. All schools at MCPS were at level 2 or 3 for chronic absenteeism. This is a challenge for schools across the state, as was mentioned by the governor, which is why attendance and absenteeism are another component in his key component of his All in Virginia initiative, and the All stands for attendance, literacy, and learning, I think, or learning loss. Subsequent presentations can address attendance initiatives and absenteeism data, and you all, of course, talked about the importance of that with your proclamation earlier this evening. All right, the final section, let me say one other thing about these ratings. The schools that are identified as accredited with conditions will be participating in academic reviews about each of those areas. We have yet to receive specific direction from the state about how that will occur this year, but we partnered with them last year and we imagine things will be similar. We will provide an update to the board on the details of those and the findings from those once we know more and once those things are up and happening. The final section of the data presentation is focused on graduation data, which have also been published on the school quality profiles. Now, it's important to note that the accreditation and graduation data were originally not scheduled for release until the end of September, but they did all of this at once. They've not done full news releases or press conferences about these components, but it's out there for the public, so we felt it was important to address all of the things, again, on a surface level tonight. All right. This slide shows on-time graduation and dropout rate trends for both MCPS and Virginia going all the way back to when this calculation was introduced in 2008. So this represents the full time for when they've had these calculations. The blue line represents MCPS on-time graduation rates, and the red line represents the Virginia on-time graduation rate. So you can see how those have compared over time. And then also the green line represents the MCPS dropout rate, and the purple one represents the Virginia dropout rate. So you can see on this slide, MCPS has the highest on-time graduation rate in the history of the indicator. Significant improvement was made in the dropout rate from 2022 to 23, as you can see in the dip on the green line, which contributed greatly to the increase in the graduation rate, as well as contributed to Osborne not being at level 3 and in fact being at level 1 because of their improvement on the dropout rate indicator. This next slide takes a closer look at the on-time graduation rate trends for Manassas City itself. So no longer do the blue and red represent us in the state. This is all Manassas City data right now, but it's looking at rates for our overall is in blue, our English learners in red, our special education students in green, and our economically disadvantaged students in purple. You will see over the history of the calculation some volatility in some of the groups, but everything trended upward last year. Okay. I will now turn the presentation over to Mr. Gefeller, who will provide information about the strategic response to the data we've provided tonight.
Good evening again. So we are actively engaged with schools through the continuous improvement planning process. We have not waited. We have been working with schools really since we got some of this data back as early as May. During the presentation, our main focus was on reading and math. This is because our strategic plan is centered around improving in these two areas. Additionally, the All in Virginia initiative from VDOE and Governor Youngkin also prioritizes reading and math. We will keep the board updated on our progress toward achieving these goals outlined in our strategic plan as we did in previous years. So there'll be more to come. So in thinking about our root cause analysis and how we are responding, so as I mentioned, school leaders are conducting root cause analysis to determine the potential causes for successes and growth areas of growth. We're looking at those improvement plans, identifying the root causes. We're looking at contributing factors in the dip in experience in grade 3 reading. In fact, those students experienced the school closures during the final quarter of their kindergarten year and then experienced virtual schooling for the majority of their first grade year. And then when they did return, we had were quarantining students, so there was not a quote-unquote normal year for those students. And then one thing that, just to go back and remind us, is that our K-2 PALS data for the 22-23, as we've already shared with you, is an encouraging sign for our current first through third grade students. I also want to just talk specifically about some of the achievement levels in our response to students, particularly at METS, in our cohort of our rising fourth grade students. So I talk about the third grade reading is a concern for us. So at METS, the student achievement is a collective responsibility. This year, our areas of focus, where we have not waited to really complete our root cause analysis, or things that we're doing to engage over there. And some of those things that we're doing right now is a greater engagement of our content coordinators with school-based staff around a cycle that works. We have a need for a renewed focus on redefining the targeted support block and the addition in the schedule for a consistent daily block of time to work with students. We are meeting twice a week to move beyond the unpacking of standards so that lesson plans are being developed to actively engage students. We are increased accountability for implementation of plans during and created during our CLT meetings. We're implementing our cooperative learning structures to fully engage students. We have created additional courses and supports for our ESOL students, a long-term ELS class. We have added additional ESOL staffing to METS for this current school year, and keeping instruction as the main priority is our focus at METS this year. It would be fair, it would not be fair to claim that the addition of the reading support teachers and the professional growth specialists did not make a significant impact across all of our schools. The professional growth specialists that we have, which numbers 2, have spent the majority of their time working with our new teachers over the course of the school system. They've worked with various topics. They've included classroom management has been a major topic that our professional growth specialists work with. The reading support teachers, primarily at the elementary schools, so we're thinking about our third grade reading, have worked along with specialist classroom teachers. They work with small groups of students to teach them how to read. The work of these professionals may not have be immediately apparent. The results of this may not be immediately apparent from a single data point, such as the SOL test. However, the accreditation combined rate calculations using grade 3 data show that over 90% of our third graders either passed the SOL, showed significant growth, 32%, or made progress as English language learners, which was 6%. In addition, 32% of those students identified as phonetic spellers in the fall passed the spring SOL test, and another 47% showed significant growth. It is also worth noting that the professional growth specialists and reading support teachers worked with all grade levels in the elementary and intermediate school, leading to significant gains in SOL scores in grades 4, 5, and 6, as well as early literacy skills as reflected in the PALS data. Also, I want to just talk that the targeted support block was also implemented in grades 4 through 6, resulting in noticeable improvements. We are aware that we still have a lot of work to do as we enter the second year of implementing our 5-year strategic plan. As the work to do as we enter the second year, and as we talked about at the beginning of this year, all students are our students, and we will not be content with our results until all of our students have achieved success. And so as we think about implementing the following, if we think specifically about our rising fourth graders, our third graders who we saw that dip, there's a few things that we are doing that I want to just mention to you all so you are aware. This year, all of our elementary schools, we've added a second reading teacher that was not there last year. So a second reading teacher, all of our elementary schools are fully staffed to work with our fourth grade students. We have cooperative learning structures, and if you visit our schools, you will see the teachers engaging students in those cooperative learning structures. We have really redoubled our efforts for a cycle that works with a focus on alignment of instruction. Our targeted support has already begun. We started it later last year. We have already begun that. September 5th, we started that across our schools here. And then our new teacher training, we have a plan for all of our new teachers to be trained in IMSE and LETRS, which is a state-approved program. And so thinking about the inclusive and collaborative learning environment, as I mentioned, we are in year 2 of our strategic plan. Our priorities remain a cycle that works, inclusive practices, a focus on literacy, instructional planning and delivery. Those are all things that we are continuing. All schools are implementing the targeted support for students based on the identified needs. And all of our instructional staff have received targeted professional development in inclusive practices. We started that with our leadership retreat back in July, and we continue to provide that with our teachers when they returned in early August. So our strategic priorities have not changed, as I mentioned. We remain committed to improving literacy, promoting inclusive practices, and enhancing instructional planning and delivery. By implementing consistent processes through a cycle that works, we aim to increase student achievement by clarifying essential understandings and outcomes, aligning instruction with standards, examining curriculum alignment, and supporting differentiated learning. All of which, of those things I just mentioned, were highlighted in a recent press conference at the state level. And so I also want to highlight when we think about high quality Tier 1 instruction, and Dr. Casada showed a picture of our Algebra 1 achievement. And so when we think about the Algebra 1, I just want to highlight several factors that contributed to those results in Algebra 1. These included stronger emphasis on aligning the SOL standards with instruction, engaging conversations during collaborative team meetings, more assistance from our secondary math coordinator, and a greater support and accountability provided by the high school's math administrator. The governor and the state superintendent prioritized core instruction as remediation, assessment, and attendance. All things here that you'll see are part of our strategic plan. As recommended by the state leadership, the aligned core instruction, high-dose tutoring, which we've just got a playbook today from the Department of Education, remediation, and assessment are all the central components of a cycle that works. It is imperative for us, as we think about our strategic plan, to respect the hard work of our students, our teachers, our on-time graduation coordinators, administrators, instructional facilitators, professional growth specialists, support staff, content coordinators, who put in a lot of effort to ensure that students learn and grow and graduate on time. As we talk about here with our leadership team, our high school, we saw our high school graduation rate. That is not an Osborne issue. That starts in kindergarten. That starts in preschool. And these individuals have poured their hearts into helping our students cross the finish line and have dedicated themselves to programs like Cycle That Works, or targeted support, after-school programs, summer school, evening school, our GED program, Saturday Learning Seminar, among others. And thanks to their efforts, students have been able to stay in school and remain motivated to continue their educational journey. And so I just thought it was important that we highlight the work that is happening here. We have a very incredibly dedicated staff. And so this is an illustration that we showed at Convocation and what success looks like. Some people think success is a straight line, but success really looks like a curved line. And so when we think about what it really looks like, there's course corrections. They're essential to our success. And so this visual illustrating that success is only sometimes achieved through a straightforward path. This graphic shows some inflection points where changes in direction are necessary to continue making progress. These course corrections are a crucial aspect of moving forward towards success. They represent adjustments made after diagnosing a problem and determining the appropriate solutions based on the identified root causes. And just to highlight how this is in action, and I already mentioned the gains that we saw in Algebra 1, but I really want to provide this as an example of what this looks like in action here. So in the past, students who were chosen for Algebra 1, it was based on teacher and counselor recommendations, as well as conversations with families. However, we have made changes to that process for placing rising 7th graders in math courses. The new approach is a more objective and aims to provide appropriate challenges for each student. It takes into account various factors such as SOL, the Virginia Growth Assessment, course grades, teacher recommendation, the Iowa Aptitude Test, our digital math platform assessments, and performance tasks. And students now have 4 options to choose from: Math 7, Math 7 Honors, Algebra 1, and IMS Algebra 1 at the middle school. So that's an example of how we have looked at how can we provide more access to kids, how can we provide more rigor to students, how can we take a more objective approach to encouraging students to try something more rigorous. As I said, there are several factors that contributed to our improved results in algebra, and they included a stronger emphasis on aligning SOL standards in instruction, engaging conversations during collaborative teams, and providing that more support with our secondary math. And those changes would not have been possible without everyone coming together to look at a solution for the betterment of students. And with that, we're happy to answer any questions.
Questions or comments from the board? Mrs. Brooks.
Thank you all, both of you, for the presentation, especially the strategic response. And while there's some data that shows we have some work to do, there's also very positive data that shows an upward trend, and it's really nice to see that, because we all know or need to remember that while SOLs are an important factor in measuring student achievement, that there's a lot of other factors that go into that, and it's not just one size fits all. I just offhand am not a proponent of SOLs, and they're just not for everyone. My daughter could never pass them, but that didn't mean that she wasn't successful. So I'm sure that this upward climb is going to continue because of all the work that you guys have put into this and you're continuing to put into it, and for the plan that's already in place. So thank you.
Thanks, Mrs. Brooks. Mrs. Williams, do you have any comments?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, as you said, we have a lot of work to do. And every single one of us up here have dug into all these numbers, and we've already been to the Virginia Department of Education website and really have looked and dug into much more than what you have presented here. So I'm not going to go into all of what we need to do. It sounds like you guys are on top of it, and you are going to come and present us what you're doing, what's working, what's not working. I do want to point out, we definitely had not rising stars, I want to say shining stars, really. When you say that you guys are going to take a look deeply at what went wrong or what went right, is part of that process looking at the individual schools and how their culture is there and try and duplicate that culture to others?
Yes, so Dr. Quesada has already started meeting with individual school teams to look at and analyze, what went well, what didn't go well. If we didn't get the results we wanted, why didn't we get the results we wanted? What do we need to do to move forward? Dr. Brent, also our interim director of school leadership, has began meetings with school teams. He actually met with METS today and was talking with them about their data and some things that we need to do differently, as the things that I mentioned there, making sure that we're monitoring. So it is very individualized. It's, as we talk about name and need for students, we also talk about name and need for schools. What do schools need? And how can we replicate success in different places? And so we want to make sure that if we're seeing success at one school, we want to identify what's working and then be able to replicate that in all of our schools. So absolutely.
And then I'm glad in your presentation that you did mention that every school had at least a level 2 of chronic absenteeism and how important it is for our students to get to be in school. I attended 2 PEP classes last week, one at METS, one at Weems, and I will tell you that half the evening the discussion was exactly that. So I was very, very proud to hear that. Question, you mentioned that all of our elementary schools are fully staffed. Does that mean do we have any teacher shortage?
Fully staffed with reading teachers.
Fully staffed of reading teachers.
Yes.
Do you have the number, or can you get me the number of what our teacher shortage looks like right now?
I don't have that number in front of me, but we could get you that number.
Okay, thank you. All right, those are the big questions I have. And then I do also want to commend of course, all of you, but the staff at Osborne High School. There's so much work that I can clearly see that is being done there, to include evenings, after hours, working with students, tutoring students. It shows in the data. So I want to put it out there in public that I cannot tell you how much I appreciate everybody's work. Saturday seminars, not just staff, but parents. My gosh, how many Saturdays was I up working hard at cooking breakfast for all of our students who would show up on Saturdays to take on that extra instruction. So I wanted to definitely give them a shout out, and that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams.
The first Saturday Learning Seminar is this Saturday.
Okay, thanks.
Mrs. Brescia.
Thank you for, sorry. Thank you for that detailed presentation. I shared some of my initial reactions with you guys over email, and I was pleased to hear you address several of those points there, so we can make this all a lot faster. I am really looking forward to the school presentation that we're going to get at regarding METS, because part of the reason METS is perplexing me so much is because all of the anecdotal feedback I had heard about the past school year there was very overwhelmingly positive, and I want to make sure that we marry this positive anecdotal experience for the teachers who work there and all staff who work there, the students who go there, the families who go there, with an actual translated actionable result. I appreciated that you guys got straight to work in May. I was very glad to hear that. I'm going to go back and listen to the meeting and write it all down so I can, have that in my brain for when conversations about this come up in the future. But it's not just what's happening at METS is obviously very important, but those 8th graders, a surprising number of whom that did not pass their 8th grade math SOL, they're in 9th grade now. So what are we doing they've been in school for a month, what are we doing for them?
So we actually started in the summer. Osborne administrators met with the METS administrators team over the summer, and they discussed all the students by name and by need. So that happened this summer already. There was also, during those conversations, they focused on academics, they focused on behavior, they focused on attendance, and they were able to use that information to be ready for intervention and supports that they would be able to put in place when students arrived this August. The other thing is that students there have met individually with their counselors. They've ensured, they looked at that information they gathered over the summer to make sure students were appropriately placed in courses. If they were in need of a remediation reading course, we were able to put that in place. We have also purchased some reading software, Lexia, to support some of our students at the high school as well. The other thing I would say is that part of this has been to make sure that our students remain engaged. So our rising 9th graders, making sure that those students feel engaged at the high school. And so through our after-school clubs and athletics fair, which we just had, getting students enrolled in after-school clubs, after-school athletics, sports for those 9th graders has been key as well. So there's a variety of things that are happening on top of the other things that they're also available to them, the Saturday Learning Seminar. But there was a very proactive approach taken based on the data to have those two teams meet in the summer to start talking about kids.
Okay. I'm hopeful that this will help those kids, as you kind of alluded to. 9th grade is a very pivotal year. This is the engagement year. You're going to decide in 9th grade if you are in it to win it for high school or if you are not. So
Sure.
Let's keep a close eye on them. And I'm going to look forward to hearing more about, I liked what I heard today about what we're doing to challenge kids more at the middle school level for math, because we have our Bayfield team in the back. High five for the 6th grade math guys. That was awesome. Which indicates to me that we have a lot of, those kids are in 7th grade now.
Right.
We've got more than the state average's worth of kids that are potentially capable of stretching themselves in this way. So I wanted to make sure to do the shout out. And also we have 2 intermediate schools. I want to make sure Baldwin Intermediate, credit to you as well. But the 6th grade results were really wonderful. And I'm looking forward to more information and development coming that way. Coming on that. I did want to ask So we did have level 3 indicators for chronic absenteeism at a few of our elementary schools, but those elementary schools were still accredited. So this is the 3-year accreditation cycle. So if we do not fix this by this school year, what happens?
So what happens, because chronic absenteeism was on pause, the actual timeline is a little tricky to define. But obviously, those schools, right, that had level 3 indicators, so Hayden and Weems had level 3 for chronic absenteeism. In addition to Metz and Osborne, we're going to engage with academic review, with them focus on absenteeism. The state has great resources and tools, and Dr. Thomas and her team are already working with all of the schools around chronic absenteeism, but those two will be on the extra part of the radar because we don't want them to, the status for the school to slip, right? So a way that you can avoid that, right, is to show improvement. Obviously, you would like to get to the level 1 threshold is 15%. That's a tough threshold, like, for schools to be getting to. It's a great threshold, but it's tough these days. But to be able to show improvement, to get yourself out of level 3 into level 2 is the goal, at least to level 2. So we'll get a little bit more information from the state for each of those schools and what the timeline would be for them if it's just this year. But our goal is for them to be improving, which would make that a moot point. Yeah.
All right, so we'll stay tuned for that. Everybody grab your Show Up Manassas signs. The other question that I still have for us today is, so science is a 3-year SOL site. We take the test in 8th grade, but it's testing you on content from 6, 7, 8. And we have our 6th grade, we have a kind of an unusual system where 6th grade is taught in a different building. Does that make our task different from what other divisions have to do when they address that 8th grade test result, or, is this not a problem? It's a seamless transition.
I think other districts deal with the same thing. When I was in a neighboring district, we had 6th grade in my school, so it wasn't anything different. And majority of the schools in our neighbor has the same situation. But I think it's important for us as we think about science to make sure that we are not neglecting science at the elementary and intermediate schools, because that builds upon. As a former science teacher, a 7th grade science teacher, you could tell students that had good science instruction in 6th grade. And so it's important for us and we are looking at making sure that through our resources, through STEM scopes, through PLTW, that we are engaging students in 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, that we're engaging them vertically to make sure, because some of the 6th grade stuff is not, it basically comes back as review as 8th grade. And so through that hands-on science, through that hands-on instruction, making sure that students really understand concepts. It's particularly a little harder for us in Manassas City, given the students are still learning English. And as we know, science is heavily vocabulary, a lot of vocabulary that are not common things you would talk about. So it's something that we are focused on, through Dr. Stevenson's work with Dr. Jones, our science coordinator, working with schools to make sure that STEM scope, which is very hands-on, is implemented with some fidelity to make sure that students are learning the concepts.
Thank you for that. I wanted to ask also, back to our grade 3 reading scores. You mentioned the people who were in grade 3 last year, they really have had they've had a very unusual early elementary path. But we fell relative to the state average, and the state's 3rd graders had this. They all started kindergarten at the same time. People had a different 1st grade experience depending on where you were in the state, but everybody had to mask, everybody had to quarantine, no matter what. Nobody had a completely normal first 3 years. So I'm wondering if there is any, or perhaps we'll get this at a later time, some other explanation for what happened to that cohort.
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak to, I know that the state went down in 3rd grade reading as well. There were some school systems we looked at, we have access to all their data. There are some school systems that went down double digits in 3rd grade. And so, beyond, right now what we're looking at in terms of the disruptions that cohort had, but we also are looking at in terms of, how are we working with those students to engage them? Some of our third graders are significantly below reading level. And so, when we focused on during that targeted support on teaching kids how to read, and when you look at that, when you look at an SOL test, which is 1 point, right? We have kids that are on grade level that did not pass that SOL. And so that's something that we need to look at as well. And so really trying to redouble our efforts to figure out why students are, where they are in third grade, and looking at what we're doing with those in fourth grade is going to be key for us. But beyond some just broad brush strokes of where our students are at, and look at the disruptions that they had is right now the most plausible explanation for why we saw the dip. But at the end of the day, we're not satisfied with those results in our third graders because that builds. And so trying to redouble our efforts to make sure that we're getting kids not just on grade level, but also passing SOL tests.
Right. So for the, I was trying to write down everything as you were saying it, but I'm going to definitely have to go back and listen. So there are additional reading resource teachers. So there's a total of 2 reading resource teachers now in each elementary school. Are both of these reading resource teachers supporting the entire school, or is the idea that one of them can spend, because we do have a more sensitive cohort here, that does need some pretty clear extra attention. I can only speak for myself, but I would be comfortable with a plan that targets that, not just the half-hour targeted support block, but if there is a resource commitment that needs to be made just to that cohort, just to get them, closer to where their peers were at least, that would be something that I would be interested in hearing about. But what's going on with the 2 resource teachers that are in the elementary schools now?
So there is not a blanket, this is who you have to work with. We leave that up to school leadership because we have, we want to make sure that we're putting the resources where the need is. And certainly third grade is rising fourth grader is a priority. We also don't want to neglect our youngest readers as well, to make sure that they're building those foundational literacy skills. So it really varies across the division in terms of where the amount of time. I will say that that those reading support teachers are deployed as we talk with administrators and teams about name and need. That really is how we are approaching this. I will tell you, every elementary school, they have 120 minutes of uninterrupted language arts time. That is a priority for us. So we have the targeted support, but there is additional resources that are being pushed in through the reading support teacher during those instructional blocks for that tier 1 instruction. So that is a priority for us, looking at how we're using them across the division.
Gotcha. All right, well, that answers my remaining questions. I mean, this dialogue is going to continue because obviously it's, Dr. Quesada is going to be very busy going forward. I do want to make sure that our CCCRI discuss, that's definitely on the list because I was a little surprised to see what happened on some of those. So looking forward to digging into that at a different time. So I'll let my other board members ask their questions now. Thank you.
Mrs. Spall.
Yes, I just have a couple questions. And it's a little bit about, I think, for Dr. Quesada, for slide 10. I believe you referred to EOC reading and Algebra 1, those closing the gaps, the end of course tests. Mm-hmm. Is there a slide about biology as well?
I don't have a slide for biology, but we can get you the biology information. Yes.
That'd be great. And then METS, the science accreditation with conditions, that is our second year status, is that right?
It is correct.
Okay, so what does that look like for next year?
So what that means, right, is that it just means the intensity of the support and oversight from the state is likely going to be higher. They have not yet defined how that all is going to work, right? So everything that Mr. Gaffeller described in terms of the interventions at METS, all of that is focused everywhere, but particularly in science, right? Because this is that area. And I can tell you from a meeting I had with the METS administration and the instructional facilitator, they were talking very much about Dr. Jones, the science coordinator, is working hands-on with them, developing the assessments for them to make sure that those assessments are fully in line with the SOL throughout the year and to intervene in response to them. So that's definitely something they're talking about. And in terms of the requirements from the state, you can see when I describe what like accreditation denied is based on they no longer give you a strict timeline, right? It's based on, are you complying with what is being found and the things that are identified in the academic review, and science will be the utmost priority there. And we'll be given tools and resources and perhaps visits from them to engage with that. So when we know more about the specific requirements for METS with that, we'll let you know.
And what kind of date are we looking at? Do you have any idea?
I imagine we'll get some of that guidance soon. Again, the state published the accreditation data, but hasn't done the subsequent communication around anything around that yet. By this time last year, we already had calendars and dates and things. We haven't gotten any of that yet. So I would imagine soon, because we would want to be conducting, last year when we were conducting the academic reviews, we had a meeting with the state in November, we conducted things in December, we had follow-up meetings in March, so I would imagine those would be the timelines, but we don't have the specific dates yet from them.
Okay. So yeah, I just want to commend Osborne on their on-time graduation rate. That is amazing work. Our English learners, that's a great improvement. It's amazing. I agree, we all need to pitch in to help METS. We all need to be on deck. But I was at Osborne today. It's a very vibrant after-school life, I mean, kids were working on the windows for homecoming. People were holding the doors open if people were pushing carts or what have you. Kids all saying please and thank you. I don't think it can be overstated that our kids are, becoming more well-rounded and happier and in a better place to be able to learn. So kudos for all of that we've all been working on so hard. So thank you.
Vice Chair Stevens.
Thank you. I just wanted to talk about chronic absenteeism for a minute. This was the first year since 2020 that absenteeism was figured into accreditation.
Since 2019, so after 2019, because in the 2020 spring, there were no accreditation ratings for 2 years, right? So fall of 2020 and fall of 2021. Last year, they reported chronic absenteeism rates, but did not include them in the accreditation calculations. However, we did engage with schools that would have been at level 2 and 3 for accreditation, and school leaders began attending some cohorts. Dr. Thomas, again, worked with the state with Engage Virginia, and all of those things are getting started. We have more leaders now who are participating. This is one area where the state did give us some information, albeit on a Thursday for something that was happening the next Monday, but they did give us communication, and we got some additional principals and teams from schools to participate in another cohort regarding chronic absenteeism. So that's where we're at with that.
Anecdotally, we hear in the news, we heard the governor talk about chronic absenteeism, that this is not a Manassas City unique problem. Have you noticed, and I don't know if you can answer this question or not, has chronic absenteeism impacted other schools and other school divisions as far as accreditation is concerned?
So that's a great question. I can tell you anecdotally that I hear from neighboring school divisions that it's a major challenge, particularly at the secondary school level. What the state has not published yet is the data file where I can go in and see and look at everything. And so as soon as I do, I can analyze and say, oh, okay. But I'm hearing that it's a problem statewide and not just in schools with it's in schools at all economic levels, in all areas of the state, but I can't give you numbers on that, but I'm very curious to see once they release that information. Right now, we'd have to go to every division's school quality profile and tally that up, and this just came out on Thursday. So I imagine they'll publish the data soon, and then we can dig into it to figure out and see, are there places that aren't having the challenge? Because just like Ms. Williams asked before about, can we learn from the things that are going well here? If we've got neighbors that are having more success, then we want to engage there also, for not just for absenteeism, but for all the other areas as well.
And then when we talk about slide 11, the math differences and the math scores, you're going to give us a deeper dive into that at the middle school level, because when we're in 5th grade everybody's taking the same math class. So every student is taking that same math SOL. But then as we get into 7th and 8th grade, we start to branch off to different assessments. You're going to take a deeper dive
Yes,
into that.
absolutely, because that's really important for us to see, and as Mr. Gefeller indicated, it goes hand in hand with changes to the identification process for what students take when they get into middle school, beginning in with 6th grade, the 6th grade cohort. So we need to dive in and figure out how are those kids in 6th grade 6th, 7th, and 8th grade performing on the SOL test that they take, right? So not just the one that's assigned grade 7, the one that's assigned the label of grade 8. So we want to dig into that, but not in isolation just for SOL performance, but to see with the identification process, then how they continue after. I'd like to look to see, in response, Ms. Brescia asked a great question about what happens to the 8th graders when they get to 9th grade. So I want to look at it not just for middle school, but then what happens to the students, what has happened over time to the students who were successful or not successful in 8th grade at all the levels, to see what happens to them as they move into high school. So that's an analysis that I think needs to be that big picture to help you understand and help all of us understand where there are the biggest challenges and how we can intervene.
Okay. And, and one thing, and this isn't a question, this is just a statement, looking at our on-time graduation rates.
I'm so sorry.
Well, that was a happy song, and that goes in line with our on-time graduation rates. I mean, looking at there's a huge difference, and it's really exciting to see, and I think we really need to give a hand to our teachers who've really worked hand in hand very closely with our students. I had the opportunity to talk to some of our teachers who were working with students over the summer for that summer graduation, and the hard work they put in, and the fact that they didn't let the kids give up. And so I think that really speaks to the effort our teachers are making, our staff is making, and our administration is making. So that is really one very bright spot tonight.
And there were, just to add, not to interrupt, but
That's
we had
okay.
20 students that graduated in the summer, right, that impact the graduation cohort, and that combined with having the dropout rate are the main reasons for the big increase.
Yeah, so that's great to see. It was wonderful to see those 20 students walk across that stage, and to see the evening school and all of the work that's going on at Osborne to ensure our kids are successful. So thank you.
And I'll just wrap it up with saying thank you for your presentation, all the information tonight with highlights from the VDOE reports. I look forward to the school teams presenting how they're going to address these challenges, and also celebrating their successes with them. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is board member comments. And I will go first to our school student representatives. Ms. Island.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Good evening. First of all, I would like to say thank you to Ms. Taylor, Dr. Stevenson, Dr. Cassetta, and Mr. Gefeller. Your presentations tonight were excellent, and the way you handled the information and made it so easily digestible was amazing. With that being said, I was quite excited to hear about the plans for Aviation Academy, our adoption of the VLA, and our academic achievement and success. I would also like to give thanks to Mr. Gefeller for informing us about the direct admissions program at GMU, to Mr. Demiria for speaking about the Athletic Hall of Fame and the reverse raffle, and to Miss Adams for her dedication and work ethic for these past few decades. Finally, before we go, I would like to remind parents and guardians that depending on which schools your child attend, back to school night will occur on either tomorrow or Thursday. So please come out if you are available. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Island. Ms. Bland.
Good evening, everybody. I would just like to say how much I love and appreciate how George Mason is offering direct admission to students with at least a 3.25 GPA. As someone who is highly considering George Mason, this is a great opportunity. I actually do have a question about the specialty programs. I was wondering if the nursing program was excluded in that.
We'll find out. We'll find out and let you know. How about that?
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Bland. And from our school board members, Mrs. Brooks.
Thank you. I what I love hearing how George Mason is going to be doing this direct enrollment. That's great news. It takes a lot of the pressure off the students who find it difficult and intimidating to go through that whole process, and just gives them, a nice, comfortable way to apply to universities. So thank you for that. And aviation, kudos again. Congratulations to Miss Adams on her retirement. That's a lot of years getting our kiddos to school. I also want to say that we're making a lot of progress on a community garden project, and that it's thanks to Tara and Chris. Easton, and you know what your names are. Sorry, a little casual there. But it's a really fun project, and I'm excited to see it growing, and that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Brooks. Mrs. Braja.
Thank you. I wanted to spend my time tonight talking about Attendance Awareness Month, a proclamation that we read aloud today. The Show Up Manassas, absences add up. We are going through in my household a normal adjustment period to going to school every day. This is my child's first year going to full-time, full-day school. And so I am very sympathetic to anybody who is struggling with this transition right now. It's not easy to go from the summer life where you don't have to wake up early now to, beep, 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 pack the lunch, everyone in the car, let's go. But the great news is when the kids are small, you just pick them up and put them in that car. It relies a lot on the parental dedication to this. And, this is something that, parents, we do have a lot of control over getting our kids into school every day, even if they're older and you can't scoop them up anymore, having that regular conversation, having that encouragement, because not only is it important to show up to school every day because it goes to our accreditation standards, it's important to go to school every day and to learn how to persevere through things that are uncomfortable. It's a habit to form throughout your life. So I encourage everybody to take this Awareness Month very seriously, and we can see if we can all together raise up our attendance rates, and also raise up our sense of community and our academics and all that good stuff. So that's all for me.
Thank you. Mrs. Spall?
Hi, yes. I just wanted to share an example of what I believe is school board working behind the scenes to make change happen. It's a simple story and definitely doesn't encompass all that we do as board members, but it does show how each individual working to use their strengths to achieve collective goals can look in action. I attended the VSBA conference on education in July with our chair and another school board member, and selected a session called Show Up Amherst as a topic of interest, and was happy to learn that it exhibited many of the goals of positive character for students, families, and the greater Manassas community I'd hoped for our MCPS family for a long time. The goal was simple, and the positive message that's just show up. Show Up refers to absenteeism, but also community events, parent classes, and so much more. The entire event was part of our board member professional development opportunity in many areas of engagement, social and emotional learning, and other types of partnerships. But Show Up, coupled with another program that might be unveiled at a later date, fit the bill for me and my vision for a future Manassas. So after buy-in from our chair, Dr. Newman and his staff took the time to understand and agree on action items regarding the Show Up effort. And the result is that just 2 months later, we have tools in our tool belt that are innovative ways to capture and thank our vast number of community members who already show up for our division. But we're now ready and well positioned to be able to tackle tough subjects like what you heard about tonight regarding absenteeism in a positive and engaging way. And we know that when our kids show up, we can teach them. So I just wanted to make sure that, everyone knows that through professional development and other things that we're doing behind the scenes, we are more ready to accept the governor's challenge, to address absenteeism. And I thought it was just a good highlight to show that we are all busy behind the scenes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Spall. Mrs. Williams?
Yes, thank you. Ms. Island and Ms. Bland, thank you so much for your comments. They're always very, very enlightening and professional, and I truly appreciate them. All my board members have really already said everything that I wanted to talk about. So behind the scenes is showing up. Mrs. Spall, I'm happy that you take on such an initiative to really put yourself into our school system, our community, our students. I think we all do, and I challenge our community as a whole to do the same. Show up. We've got great staff here. They work hard. Everybody works extremely hard behind the scenes, and I'm really excited to really see what our future holds. This is not going to change overnight, and I'm really excited about our aviation opportunities for our students. With all that said, go all the sports that are going on right now. There's so many fall sports. Get out there and support your youth in your own community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. Vice Chair Stevens.
Thank you. First, congratulations to Miss Andrews. 40 years as a bus driver. I don't know anybody who could handle 5 through 18-year-olds 5 days a week for 40 years. I think you need to be sainted. So, having said that, next September 20th, E3 series is on chronic absenteeism. Last year, the E3 series, one of the E3 series evenings was on chronic absenteeism. And as a longtime mom and teacher and school board member, I learned a lot. And I learned that at one point, I had a child who was chronically absent. I had no idea how just a few absences a month add up over time. It's a great event to go to. It's very educational. It's available in English and in Spanish. And for those of you who go, there's free dinner. It's usually Chick-fil-A. So that's a big draw for everyone. Ms. Ball, thank you for show up, and I look forward to hearing more about it. It sounds like a very exciting thing. And once again, I am very excited about our on-time graduation rates for this past school year. They're good numbers, they look good. And the GMU partnership, that's going to be a great avenue for a lot of our students to go to college who may not have thought it would be a possibility otherwise. Because if you've applied to college, it's a very challenging process. There are many, many steps. And young people can get frustrated with those steps and just give up and say it's not worth it. So this is a wonderful opportunity. I look forward to hearing more about it. And like everyone else, I look forward to hearing more about this aviation program. It's a golden opportunity for our kids in a very unique place with our own airport. So thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. And I'll wrap up with a few more words about absenteeism. Missing just 2 days a month means a child misses 10% of their school year. If a child misses 10% of their school year, not only are they missing out on instruction, they are deemed chronically absent by the Virginia Department of Education. And if the VDOE finds our schools have 10% of students chronically absent, this adversely affects school accreditation. So I'm going to invite all parents who have students that are chronically absent to show up at the E3 series that Mrs. Stevens mentioned. E3 stands for Engage, Educate, and Empower. It's being held on September 20th, 5:30 p.m. at Osborne High School. Dinner is served, every student, every day, and it will be about the importance of attendance. I also wanted to thank my MCPS family that participated in the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention Out of the Darkness Walk on Sunday. It was Sunday. Dr. Cole, Robert Vavrinac, counselor at Mayfield, Kurt Emmel, Erica Lima Bravo, one of our new counselors at Osborne, Carrie McDaniel, Allison Haynes, my fellow school board members, Mrs. Brooks and Mrs. Spall. Thank you all for walking together for this important cause. And I did want to mention that every day at every school, we have learning and activities to engage our students. And just today, Mrs. Ball and I went to the activities and athletics fair that is held during lunchtime at Osborne, and probably 50 different things, maybe 50 to 70 different activities and clubs represented. So if your student is not acclimating to school, please contact your teacher and or their counselor, the student's counselor, to discuss ways to support your child at school and at home. Lots of activities out there, lots of good opportunity. And that ends my comments for this evening. Can I get a motion to go into closed session, please?
Chair, I move that the School Board of the City of Manassas enter closed session pursuant to exemptions from open meetings allowed by Section 2.2-3711, Part A, Paragraph 1 of the Code of Virginia 1950 as amended for the following purposes. 2.2-3711, Part A, Paragraph 1, discussion of personnel matter, PERS 2324-0183.
Second.
I have a motion by Vice Chair Stevens, second by Mrs. Brooks, of the School Board of the City of Manassas enter a closed session pursuant to exemptions from open meetings allowed by Section 2.2-3711, Part A, Paragraph 1 of the Code of Virginia 1950 as amended for the following purposes. 2.2-3711, Part A, Paragraph 1, discussion of personnel matter, PERS 2324-0183. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 6-0. We are in closed session. Thank you all. Have a good night.